Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader back with you, the Nader Narrative on Jersey First TV. Important topic today to talk about, and that is bullying and mental health in our schools and suicide rates and all the things that are plaguing our young children. These issues have been with us since the beginning of time, of course, but we've noticed a sharp increase during the pandemic and all of these challenges that our children are facing. But before we even got into the COVID situation and the school shutdowns and all the things that our kids dealt with, we had heartbreaking rates already of children being bullied and children taking their own lives as a result. And in the state of New Jersey, our stats are not great. We have someone today on with us who I am proud to call a friend and is really beloved throughout the state. The mother of a beautiful young girl, Mallory Grossman, who we sadly all lost in 2017. And her mother and her father have taken up the mantle to really watch what's going on with bullying in our state and what's going on with these young people and how we can push back and actually begin to solve this. So I am so honored to bring on today to talk to her in more detail, Dianne Grossman. Welcome to Jersey First. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You know, I say we all lost because I think so many people in reading Mallory's story and getting to know you and hearing about it, you know, they feel an affinity. They feel like they knew who she was. Of course, no one's loss even comes close in any way to what you lost as her mother and what Seth lost as her father. Mallory, I want to show just a picture of her here because I love this picture. It's just absolutely beautiful. The look in her eyes and in your eyes as a mother, it's just striking. I want you to tell us about Mallory. I like to start with that.
Oh, thanks. It's my favorite question. We refer to Mallory as the all-American little girl. You know, she just, in the mornings, she would play with American Girl dolls. And in the afternoons, you know, she's testing and trying out makeup. You know, she was a normal, everyday 12-year-old little girl. She was a good student. She was well-behaved. She followed rules. I mean, there really wasn't much that we could say. And I think that's the important part is that she was just ordinary. She was just normal. And not that one has anything to do with the other, but for us, there's no way you could have predicted what happened to our family.
And that's one of the important messages here, isn't it? It's not really that you have to have a combination of things, that there are issues in the home, in your case, no, that there are issues at school like academic performance, no. I mean, in Mallory's case, we're looking strictly at bullying, but the point of that is that this can happen to any child, and that's not to strike fear per se in the hearts of parents, but it's more of a cautionary tale. Don't look the other way. There may be something going on in your child's life. Perhaps your child is the victim of bullying, but perhaps your child is also bullying others, and you know, we need to help these young children. In Mallory's case, how did this all start?
It's what they refer to as, it's called relational bullying, right? So it's like mean girl syndrome. So it's a group of girls. In this case, there were 4 girls that I believe that Mallory wanted to be friends with them. You know, she saw herself on the outskirts, and it really kind of started in 5th grade, and it was pretty passive aggressive. It was, you know, I'm friends with you today, I'm not friends with you tomorrow. And so I think that what happened is this is a normal progression. So myself as a mother, teachers, everyone saw it as normal teen tween behavior. It really started to escalate in 6th grade when the bullies, as they're called, right, became empowered. And that's kind of, again, a normal progression is they get away with one form of hate and then they continue to escalate. And so that's really what happened with Mallory is it's this relational, I want to fit in, I want to be a part of the crowd. They send mixed messages, make her think that she's going to be a part of it. And then, of course, they begin to escalate. And it is such a slow moving situation that as a mom and parents, and I think this is why I did decide to speak out, is because it's so slow moving. And as a mom, you're like, oh, let me not make a bigger situation out of
Right.
something that's already. So that's kind of normal as a mom or a dad, is you don't want to blow the situation out of proportion, but you also are trying to navigate it with normal teen tween behavior and normal growing pains. But then when does it transition into bullying? And that question is, once your child starts showing signs of school refusal, they start having physical symptoms, they start having headaches, their grades drop, they stop doing the things that they love, like Mallory quit gymnastics. None of those things were on my radar.
Mm.
And so that's when it transitioned from everyday kid behavior to true classified bullying.
And those are all really good points for parents to watch for, right? That will be
Right.
signs that something bigger is going on. But you also went to the school, and one of the reasons you've become an activist, if you will, you've become a fighter for, reducing bullying and handle these things correctly in the schools, is because you worked with the school. You went through their process and procedure as best you could. Yet they did really nothing to help. Ultimately, in fact, I know there are many, many things that you did leading up to that
Mhm.
day, that particular day where you had the long meeting in the principal's office. And I want you to talk about that, because not only is that day just really, really difficult, but this is where the crux of the issue is
It
that
is.
what is going on in the schools.
Right. So the biggest problem is New Jersey loves to hang their hat on, we have the toughest bullying laws.
Right.
And my pushback is, well, if you have, and I even shared on Mallory's Army Today, the NJ.com article about other parents that New Jersey loves to say how powerful their anti-bullying laws are, yet we still have schools not following them. We still have schools taking on their own perspective of what it is. So it's really not clearly defined. And so schools in various areas, different counties, are all sending a different message. And so the legislators are patting themselves on the back saying, we did a great job. Yet the schools have lack of training. They have no knowledge. Barely do they understand their own anti-bullying laws. And they've given them a lot of gray area. And schools, for some reason, seem to think that if they are fighting the bullying that's going on in their school, that reflects negatively on their scorecard. And so on that day, it was a lot of pushing stuff under the rug, again, dismissing. And I think that parents and school administrators both do this because they're afraid to escalate the situation. They don't want it to get out of hand. In our particular situation, the principal was he was new to the school. He'd been there about 18 months. And I think he was still young in trying to, get parents on his side and and I think he was more of looking to become a fan. He told Mallory things like it's okay to be hated online, because at that time there was a Facebook group of moms that didn't care for him. And so he knew about this Facebook group. I wasn't in it. I mean, I gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
We were there for 3 hours, and it was more about Mallory testifying about what she was going through every day. And what was so frustrating is we had already gone over what her day was like.
Right.
They had already pulled Mallory out of classes and taken her out of choir and put her in STEM. They had already done certain things. They told me that Mallory had a comprehension issue, and that's why her grades were low. So we had gotten a tutor. So, we followed the school's recommendations, we followed their rules, and we let them lead what was going on. What they failed to do is really understand the gravity. And once he embarrassed Mallory by giving her a blue poker chip and asking her if she was all in, by him doing that, he told her that he was going to embarrass her. He told her he was going to put the poker chip on her locker. He literally, so in all essence, his attempt to try to minimize it actually made it worse. And I truly believe, had he not reacted that way that day, Mallory would still be with us. I tell everyone Mallory's first attempt was her last attempt.
Oh, it's almost like he shifted responsibility to her to say, you need to do something, right?
That's
Like,
100% what he
yeah,
did. And that's what we do in this country, which is very frustrating, is that we blame the rape victim. What
right.
were you wearing? How much did you have to drink? And so that's exactly what was happening, is he was shifting the blame to Mallory. And by giving her the poker chip, we all know what poker is. There's only one winner. Right. By giving her this poker chip and telling her she's all in, he made it seem like it was her responsibility. Never in any of my encounters with the guidance counselor, the vice principal, or the principal was there ever a conversation about what they were going to do to change the behavior of the girls that were literally attacking Mallory. And it's this passive aggressive behavior, kicking her chair when no one's looking, pulling her hair when no one's looking, following her into the bathroom after she's told the guidance counselor what happened and telling her that they were going to kick her ass. That type of behavior was never disciplined. And to follow New Jersey's law, those girls were never given a HIB. They were never disciplined for their behavior. To this day, they have never been held accountable, whether it be civilly or criminally, for their behavior. And this is why children continue to bully, because when children can predict the consequences of their behavior, that's when you will see change. And right now, it's just a free-for-all in New Jersey's public schools.
So Mallory felt hopeless. We presume she felt overwhelmed by this, and she felt she couldn't continue. Nothing you could have predicted. You never imagined what you would find that night, and it's beyond anyone's comprehension, Dianne. No one can ever understand it unless they've stood in your shoes. But you've decided after the loss of Mallory to fight for all the things that were not given to you as help, were not done correctly in the school. You started Mallory's Army, which turned into this focus on Mallory's Law. I have on the screen here, blew out bullying in New Jersey, which is a saying that you've said in many interviews. What does that mean in the context of Mallory?
So there's so many different ways. First of all, there's a lot of conversation about changing the culture in our schools, but that's a moot point if we don't have direction to do so. So if you don't have a way in the school, so to change the culture, there was actually an Ivy League case study that was done in New Jersey back in 2013, and it found that one of the ways you can influence the popular kids is through a bright colored band on the arm of influential children, also known as popular kids. So when the popular kids decide how kids like Mallory are treated in school, there is this organic, probably 30 to 40% shift. And so that's where the blew out bullying is. It pertains to the blue band that we wear. And then when we do the school presentations, we give the schools the blue bands and we ask them to remind the kids to wear them. Like, it's almost like tying a string around your finger to remember to pick up milk and bread, right? Everything is so in our phones, in our electronic devices, that sometimes we need something on our body to remind us what we stand for. And I've heard from so many children that are like, you know what, Miss Grossman, I understand what you're saying. And I've never taken my blue band off. And so that's where the blew out bullying kind of came from, is it became our color. It became our mantra.
Yeah. And I know you've talked to tons of schools, and a lot of those kids are wearing those bands. You've just mentioned something, the phones, that I think everyone listening needs to pause and consider, because a lot of us growing up, we experienced bullying to some degree. I'm sure people all have their stories. I remember being bullied, but the difference with today, and the reason why the stakes are so much higher, is because we have 24/7 in our back pocket access to what people are saying all the time. And so
our
Mallory's case, she couldn't get away from it.
Right. Our relationship with technology needs to change. And that starts with us as parents, and it starts with the school systems. We're seeing an increase in bullying in the schools because as soon as, and I don't want to blame COVID, but we have to recognize that COVID has extended into the home, because now you've got teachers who solely rely on technology to communicate with kids. You've got soccer coaches that solely rely on technology. And so we have taught children and ourselves that we would miss out, or that there's going to be a message that we're not going to get. I remember Mallory missed a cheerleading practice because they posted on Instagram that the field had changed. And I was really upset. I was like, I don't think that we should be using these social media platforms. And now they have become the way that we communicate. And so we are on 24/7. And so there is this added stress in our life. There is this added component that we constantly have to manage. If you make a list of all of the things that you have to manage throughout the day, personalities, coworkers, now add that to a child with an underdeveloped brain. It's just too much.
Yeah.
They feel the need to constantly have that phone, which by the way, isn't a phone. It's a miniature computer.
That's right.
In their hand 24/7, even right down to using it as an alarm clock to get up in the morning. And I think that our relationship with technology has to change, right? We have to put the parent back in parenting. And that means that it starts with us. Like our relationship with technology has to change. If we want our children to enjoy technology but not abuse it, then that has to start with us and our relationship with how much we use it, and put boundaries up. And I think that teachers and administrators need to step back just a little bit and really take their own temperature as to how much they're using technology in the everyday classroom, and have a healthy balance of the technology, but as well as human interaction.
It's such an incredible, that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother effort. That's a whole nother thing, because it's huge. And I think most people would now admit that it's gotten out of control. And it's really hard as a parent to say, well, okay, you're not going to have a phone. And then your child has to exist in that world and literally cannot, because they're missing. They can't.
Right.
They can't.
You
So we're
cannot
forced,
say you cannot give them
Right.
not give them a phone, especially if they're active in any type of sports.
Right.
You know, the teachers
Right.
expect them to be able to, and the problem with it is that the school systems haven't figured out a one way to communicate. You've got, you know, your English teacher that posts on this app, and you've got another
Right.
teacher that posts on this. And so it really does, it's an unhealthy way for us to navigate. So you add pressure of peers on that. You add pressure of sports on that. You put academic pressure on that. You put blended families on that. It's just too much. And our children are definitely suffering. And I think what we're seeing right now on both sides of the fence, whether it's the children that are being victimized and being bullied, but also the children that are bullying because they're acting out. So this is a vegetable soup of a mistake that we have made as adults, as a culture, and we're starting to really see the evidence of our mistakes.
You know, it used to be, you've made this point before, you got bullied in school, you had a bad day of school, whatever happened, you got home, you went home, and there was a certain respite from that, right? It couldn't reach into the home. Only way to do that would be a phone call or someone stopping by. But there was this sense that you're home and you're no longer dealing with it. But with the phone, Mallory was constantly exposed to the bullying or to the messages or checking to see what they were posting. She didn't have a break from it.
Right. And again, that's part of our culture. Like Jen and I, who works in my office and works with Mallory's Army with me, we constantly talk about and say when we were kids. And it's hard to say we were kids because that doesn't matter what it was like when we were kids, but to understand how quickly it shifted. When we were kids and someone was crank calling or making fun of us, what would we do? We would take the phone off the hook.
That's right.
The exact opposite is happening today's kids. Not only are they not taking the phone off the hook and taking a break from it, but they are actually going into whatever platform that they think that they're being made fun of or being bullied on or taken out of context. And they're seeking, they're looking for what's being said about them. So they are actually in turn victimizing themselves over and over and over again. And so because they're seeking it and they're looking for that, what's going on, then they're empowering the bullies. And so this becomes a tug of war between the victim and the bully. It empowers them. And then it just becomes this vicious cycle of what's being said about me. And it can be extremely overwhelming. And there just really isn't a break from it on any sorts. And I want to add that it's not just the bully, but it's the bully and their 900 followers.
Right. That's right.
Right. So the people who like it, the people who give it a smiley face, the people who laugh at it and share it, they're just as responsible as the person who made the post. But keep in mind, the reason why this is a cultural problem is because the kids have influencers online making fun of people and getting likes and shares. And it's becoming so they're being taught organically that it's a comedic relief to make fun of someone what they don't understand from a child's perspective versus an influencer's perspective, what really goes on behind the scenes. I sincerely believe we have a major problem on our hands with kids, and our kids are solving it themselves with suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not something you can legislate. I mean, I want to talk about Mallory's Law now, but you're talking about things that require parenting and common sense and compassion and a social shift, which a law simply cannot do. We can definitely look at the schools, and you've done that. And I want to talk about Mallory's Law. But when it comes to parenting, when it comes to our society, these are things that we're going to need to take on as a compassionate society who understands that we are way, way over the line. We've crossed the Rubicon here. What are we modeling? I mean, that, like I said, that's a whole nother thing that we need to take on. But let's shift to the legislation, because you, as you went through the school's procedures, and processes, they didn't work.
Right.
And you knew they were broken and they didn't work. So Mallory's Law finally got passed. Tell us about Mallory's Law.
So I tell everyone it's a base hit, right? It is not a solution. But what it did is it created a lot of dialogue, and it forced schools to start really having a conversation about it and putting some verbs in their sentences. Yeah. One of the biggest problems that I think that parents have is when to report it and when not to report it and how to report it. So Mallory's Law puts a system in place for the school system to administratively understand what's going on and forces them, and it forces parents to put things in writing. I think both parents and the schools have to come to the same conference table and be prepared to put things in writing and say, this is how we handle it. You know, the New Jersey HIB statute already says that they have a 10-day grace period. Mallory's Law forces them to put that 10-day grace period in writing. So it kind of starts the clock ticking. And so no parent or teacher or administrator can say, well, Mrs. Grossman, this is the first I'm hearing about it. Right. There is a paper trail that supports that they have to do their job. The other thing it puts a little teeth in there that, you know, you want to make it a pain in the neck for parents to have to go to court and have to adjudicate this and do things. So while it's going to take a little while for the State Department of Education to really put the infrastructure in place for this, I certainly think that having a ticket system in writing certainly will help the schools try to manage their time frame. Right. The other thing is that we've got a lot more work to do. And I think New Jersey needs, better than their anti-bullying task force or their anti-bullying committee, to say, well, we need to change the culture. I think as a society, we need to be prepared for children to get in trouble as juveniles so that they don't get in trouble as adults, right? I would much rather parent a 13-year-old that's made some mistakes rather than a 19-year-old that's being charged with a felony of hazing. And by the way, if you look at the definition of hazing and you look at the definition of bullying, they're very similar. Mm-hmm. And so what we are doing is we're trying to parent juveniles so that they don't become felonies later on. Mm-hmm. And so I think that parents and school systems need to stop being so lax, and I'm seeing this in the schools when we go in there. It's a free-for-all in New Jersey's public schools. There's no dress codes anymore. There's, language is out of control. If you understood the language that I hear in the hallways, how the F word is being dropped normally and casually. Yeah. Teachers with cell phones in their back pockets of their leggings, right? Kids allowed to have phones in schools with no supervision. Not only are the schools liable for this, but they are creating dangerous scenarios where they are civilly and criminally responsible. And we're not going to get better. We're going to get worse.
Well, it's definitely a clarion call for all of us. And I think you're right. It used to be that childhood is where the mistakes were made and the parents helped guide you to the point so you wouldn't make them when you were older. But right. but now, I mean, these kids are growing up so quickly, and it is out of control, and that's on all of us. And I know there's more we can do legislatively. I know there's more that you want to do legislatively, but when it comes to all of that, we've got to look in the home, and we've got to look at each other and say, these schools are supposed to incubate these kids in a much different way. So we are definitely not where we need to be, and it's frightening.
New Jersey spends way too much money on per student. We're one of the richest states as it pertains to educating and spending money, but we're administrative heavy, and we are investing in a smaller percentage of the population and not the entire population. Yeah. Many schools make the mistake and used protected categories as the teeth for the anti-bullying law, and that comes down to strict just education. If New Jersey wants to say they have the strictest laws in as it pertains to bullying, then they've got to do a massive overhaul as it pertains to training and take some of that administrative money and actually spend it on the people that are on the front line, like the lunch aides, like the volunteers in the school, like the bus drivers. We have got to be spending money on the lower people, the people who have direct access and interactions with our children in the school.
You know, Dianne, we need you in I don't know what role it is. It's got to be some like czar of all of this. But you are so clear about what needs to change. I mean, truly, it's amazing. You're so well spoken about it, and I know you're continuing to fight and speak out. I want to leave people with a few resources because, you know, we can spend a whole hour just talking about Mallory easily, but you made a movie, and the movie, I have to tell everyone, you really need to watch it. I sat down with my 4 teenagers. We watched it as a family. It caused a lot of very important conversations. If you don't mind, Dianne, I would just want to play the trailer here for everyone.
Yeah.
Hello? 911, where's your emergency?
It was a new school, lockers. It was supposed to have all the elements of a fresh start.
There are no words to describe a child laying in a casket. That's yours.
So that's still available. Very important. It's moving. It's also gives you ideas on what to do. I mean, the whole thing is such an important movie. So Dianne, where can people watch that?
So the most popular place, you can go to mallorysarmy.org, our website, and there are links to it. It's free on Tubi if you use that as a streaming source. If it's $5 on Amazon Prime or iTunes. So there's various links on our website that take you to it. You know, it was a labor of love. And the most important part of it was exactly what you said is sit down, watch it with your kids and have the very healthy, thought-provoking conversation. You know, the kids know who the bullies in their schools are. The kids know who the victims in their schools are. So having this conversation isn't just about protecting your children, but it's about coming together as a community to protect all of our children, right? Like if you can have a conversation with your kids about who is a victim in their school system, imagine how thankful that parent would be that your kid learns what it requires to be an upstander, right? We throw these words out to kids, but we don't really give them any actions. And Mallory, the film, should be taught in every classroom, in every school, whether it's middle school all the way through college. It's really talking about the language of what happens. But most importantly, the film is about resilience, a skill set that is our children are just missing. You know, as parents, we do everything that we can to keep them from falling down and skinning their knee. And yet by doing that, we have removed a skill set of resilience, of them learning how to pick themselves back up when something happens. And so when something does happen, it becomes so critical and it just becomes an, end of the world. And we need to start teaching our children that they are going to experience pain on so many different levels, and that when they do, how do they respond to it? And I think that that's really the biggest message in there, is teaching our children the foundation of resilience, emotional intelligence. We teach emotional intelligence in Ivy League colleges. We should be teaching emotional intelligence in our school systems. If we really want to reach the kids and we really want to touch on the things that we think are missing, and we want to teach the whole kid, then we have to embrace resilient behavior. And I think that that's really what the film offers, in addition to teen suicide, bullying, and all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so incredibly important. And for parents watching, they may have a child who's being bullied, or their children may be bullying others. I think that conversation where kids look at themselves and say, wait a minute, am I possibly a bully? I don't think anyone defines themselves that way. And remember, these are kids making mistakes. That's what you do when you're a child. And so, you may be the parent of a child who's bullying someone. Isn't it better to know that? Isn't it better to talk about that? it's not that these kids are all bad kids necessarily. One's headed for a life of crime, or they're not in any way, can't be, redeemed. These are kids.
I
And
always
we're
say to
responsible.
parents are always so afraid of their child being labeled a bully.
Right.
And I always say to them, like, it's just bad behavior.
Yeah.
If we could just take that word out of it and stop. And I always say to parents, your child being accused of bullying someone isn't a reflection of you. When you do nothing about your child bullying someone,
right.
that is when it becomes a reflection on you. And
That's
so
right.
I think that we need to, as moms, as dads, as members of Board of Ed, we need to recognize that the best gift that we can give our children are boundaries, right? Our children have access to content they are not mature enough to navigate. They get caught up in these, chat rooms, and they get caught in these long, deep, what do you call them, rabbit holes, right?
Yeah.
Of the internet, and they're just not mature enough. So stop taking it as a reflection of your parenting because your child has been accused of bullying someone, and be more and care more about what is said about you when you actually dive in and start parenting your kid. Stop being their friends and start being their parents.
Dianne, your voice is so important. If I could just capture that all in a guide and give it to every parent in this country, your voice is incredibly valuable. Thank you for embracing the absolute hell that you went through and deciding to use it for good. I know you're going to continue to do that. How can people help you? Where can they find you?
One of the biggest obstacles we have is fundraising. I know that sounds crazy, but, it's expensive to run an organization. We put the film out and we put it out there for $5. And we did that on purpose. We don't want anyone to say we can't afford to watch the film. So fundraising, obviously, small donations help our organization. Teachers, Board of Ed members, infuse the film into your teachings, get it approved and get it into the classrooms. Encourage teachers to have hard conversations. It is such a simple tool. And hopefully we will see everyone in the 23-24 school year. We're kind of booked up for this year. Hopefully Mallory's case will finally be heard in the court system. So we certainly hope that Mallory's civil case against the school system and against the parents will be finally heard this summer. So that's really important to us. So we're taking a break from the school presentations, but hopefully after this is over, we will certainly be back. And who knows where you'll see Dianne Grossman at. I don't know. My husband fears that comment, but we don't know.
I'm sure he does, but sorry, Seth, you married a star. I don't know what to tell you. But those court cases are important too, because precedence here is really important.
I think it is, and unfortunately, it's not to punish the school system,
right.
but at the same time, I mean, if New Jersey is going to hang their hat on their toughest laws, and there is clear evidence that the school just not only didn't follow it, but completely disregarded it, even on the day that she died, and the girls have still never been issued a HIB, which, by the way, is a whole other soapbox. It's irrelevant. There's this permanent folder nonsense. We could have a whole show about that. But if they're going to hold their hat on it, then we're going to show them where there are gaps in their mistakes that they made. And, I'm happy to sit at any conference table and hash out how we could be better. The invitation is out there. It is up to the legislators in Trenton and the State Department of Education and the Education Committee to invite people like me in who have experienced the New Jersey schools to make it better.
That's right. Well, you're already making it better, and I know you're not even close to being done. So we'll have you back. Keep us updated on what happens on the court case. That's important for all of us because it will protect all the children, and hopefully that gets through in a positive way. Dianne, thank you so much. We send you a big hug. We really admire you. Thank you for everything you've done. And to my audience, please go to mallorysarmy.com. Is it .com or .org? .org. Sorry, mallorysarmy.org. Make sure you see the movie. Have these conversations with your kids. Don't be afraid to do it. It can make all the difference. You never know whose life you're going to save and whose life you're going to change. Dianne, thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.